All right, this is the video notes for Module 6. This is part about supply. So this part is going to be very similar to when we talked about demand. You'll notice that I have on here basically the same setup as when we had for demand. So first of all, the definition of supply is the amount of product that is offered for sale. So keep in mind that supply is what the producer is willing to offer for sale. It has nothing to do with demand or consumers. It's what the producer is willing to offer. Similar to in class, I gave the example of babysitting. How many times would you be willing to babysit if I said if the price was $4 an hour? How many times would you be willing to babysit if I said the price was $8 an hour? $12 an hour? You are probably more willing to babysit when the price goes up to $12 an hour than when the price was $4 an hour. That's how much the product, in this case babysitting services, is offered for sale. So from that and from what you already know about supply, so based off from our babysitting graph that we did in class as well as your reading, I want you to see if you can figure out what the definitions for these three terms are. So law of supply, change in quantity supply, change in supply. So think about it from the perspective of if we're talking about the price going up, what happens to the babysitting services. So pause the video, see if you can figure out what law of supply means, change in quantity supply means, and change in supply. Okay, do you have your own definition? So law of supply. So law of supply, think about it, as the price goes up, what happens to your willingness to babysit? Yeah, it's going to go up. So price and quantity supply are directly related. You can definitely tell this by looking at the supply curve. The supply curve is upward sloping. Just like when we talked about demand curves, and demand curves being downward sloping, supply curves are always upward sloping, which shows that they have a direct relationship. Change in quantity supplied. So change in quantity demand was when we had a movement along the same demand curve in response to a change in price. Well, change in quantity supplied is not that much different. All we're talking about now is supply rather than demand. So it's a movement along the same supply curve in response to a change in price. So what does this look like? It looks like very similar to how we talked about demand. It's going that A to B thing. So the only reason that, for example, if we're talking about this from this babysitting standpoint, we're willing to babysit more often at point B rather than point A is because the price went up. Or you're less willing to babysit at point A rather than point B because the price went down. All right, lastly, change in supply. Now, change in supply, if you remember when we talked about change in demand, was when we had the entire demand curve shifting, and it caused the amount demanded at every price to change, and it was a result of 5 factors. Well, here we're talking about supply. So here we're talking about, again, a shift in the supply curve, which causes the amount supplied to change at every price due to one of 5 factors. Now, the disappointing part is that the 5 factors aren't the same for demand and supply, but if you think about it, consumers and producers don't care about the same thing, so it makes sense that they have different factors that cause a change in supply from the factors that cause a change in demand. Now, the other thing about a change in supply is this throws people off because it looks slightly different. So because the supply curve is upward sloping, our right shift in supply looks like it's below the original supply curve. So my original supply curve is this blue line, and my right shift is this green line. My left shift is this red line. So automatically people assume that because of that, that a right shift is a decrease. No, a right shift is not a decrease. A right shift is still an increase in supply. So keep in mind that just because it looks different doesn't mean it is different. Right shift is still increase, left shift is still decrease. All right, so that was all the notes that I wanted to give for supply, but we are going to be adding this to your graphing section of your notebook. So I want you to add this part where change in quantity supplied, what does the graph look like? What's it caused by? Change in supply, what does the graph look like? What is it caused by? So again, pause the video, see if you can work through this without looking back at your notes. Okay, so hopefully for the graph for change in quantity supplied, you drew the A to B, and it's caused by the price of the product being graphed. So keep in mind that this is the price of the item that we're going to sell. So for example, if we're talking about gasoline, we're talking about the price of gasoline that we're selling, not the price of oil. So you'll understand in a minute why that's important. For number 2, the way the supply can change is going to be a change in supply. And a change in supply, you should have drawn this graph. So you should draw the right shift, left shift scenario. Now it's caused by the chart on the next slide, which is this. So I want you to draw this below that change in supply. So you're going to have those 5 factors: input prices, price of related goods, technology, expectations, and number of producers. The description column, remember, is going to be an explanation of what this particular factor means. Right shift, what causes an increase in supply. Left shift, what causes a decrease in supply. You will notice that this chart is the same setup as the factors that cause a change in demand. I did that on purpose because that way hopefully it'll be more useful to you, and so it's not confusing that you have to be able to differentiate as far as how to use this chart. So hopefully that will be helpful to you when we put supply and demand together. All right, so use your book to be able to fill this in, or else check with somebody in class, and then we'll go from there. Let me know if you have any questions.